Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and it's a one-man mailbag day. I wanted to thank you guys. Sent in more questions for the first half of March than I think we had in maybe January and February combined. So if I didn't get to your question, I apologize. I'm going to get to as many as I can today, but I am excited. Some great questions, of course, about the 2025 draft class. A lot of questions about A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and some of these wide receivers. I actually wrote about that today as wide receiver dynasty rankings update for the month of March is coming out on Tuesday. Monday, running backs were already published. We'll have quarterbacks, tight ends. The dynasty trade charts are up on Sportsline. A programming note, we will have a normal show on Friday of this week. Next week, I will be off, taking a little vacation to get ready for what is one of our most impactful and busiest months of the year here at FFT Dynasty. We will once again be doing our 2025 NFL draft previews. We've got some great guests lined up. We'll have a couple of running back shows, a couple of wide receiver shows, a quarterback show, a tight end show. We're going to have you up to date on all the big name prospects and some of the best experts from around the industry, some of their favorite sleepers. Maybe we'll find this year's Puka Nacua, as if there will be one. But I want to start off with the emails. Like I said, fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. Send in your questions there. I said this last month and you guys really listened. We got a bunch of them. Let's get through as many as we can. Simon had a question about starting a rebuild. Some of you guys just got nauseous. Some of you guys hate that rebuild period. I absolutely love it. I think we had Davis Maddock on our last show, and he said that rebuilding may be even more fun in some ways than contending. I agree, but he says, I'm at the bottom of my rebuild, a long way from competing, without many good wide receivers. I have multiple picks across the first two rounds in the 2025 draft. What approach should I take, given that this draft has so many running backs, which I'm not in need of yet? And I do think that there are some rebuilders, and including at least one of my teams, that kind of find yourself in that place. The beginning of the rebuild, not exactly when you want to be stocking up on running backs. And this is a great running back class and kind of a weak quarterback and wide receiver class. That being said, I do think there's a couple of wide receivers, 3 or 4 at the top of this class. Tet McMillan, despite the speed concerns. Luther Burden, if he gets the right landing spot. Travis Hunter, if he's actually going to play wide receiver. And then even Matthew Golden, the speedster. If those guys land in the right spot, I'm going to get a lot more excited about them in round 1. So I'd probably be looking, Simon, for a mix of approaches here. And it's not going to be solidified until after the NFL draft and we find out where these guys are. And I don't know exactly where your picks are, but I would probably kind of be going 50-50 on trying to land a couple of the top wide receivers in this class, because I do think a couple of them will hit and be top 20, maybe even one top 12 dynasty wide receiver in the class. And then I would also be looking to move into that 2026 class, which I do think will be better for wide receivers. I'm probably not targeting running backs in the first round unless you have 101 and just can't get a good deal for it. Then I'd be fine with go ahead and take Genty and maybe move him later. Maybe you're good by the time that you need him. But I wouldn't be opposed in round 2. It's a very deep running back class also. I think there's a chance in round 2 that you find a couple of running backs that become starters, and maybe you can turn those into 2026 firsts halfway through this season. So kind of split up the firsts, try to move a couple of them for 2026 first, draft a couple of the top wide receivers, and then target these running backs and maybe a tight end in round 2 and look to move the running backs that turn into starters in the middle of the season. Joseph brings up a good question about trading wide receivers for tight ends in tight end premium leagues. He joined a startup half point per PPR tight end premium super flex league last year. Has a solid roster, lost in the first round of the playoffs last year, looking to move some of his wide receivers to improve his roster, but he's having a hard time finding a balanced trade. His wide receivers, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Jaylen Waddle, Ricky Pearsall, Jalen McMillan, Cedric Tillman, A.D. Mitchell. Here's what I would say. It's tough to find targets with those wide receivers because I think you kind of have a good number 1, a good number 2, maybe 2 good number 2s, but then a lot of question marks after that. I don't really in tight end premium like targeting the mid-range to low-end starting tight ends. What I'd maybe be looking for, and I'm going to say this again a little bit later because we had another tight end question. In fact, maybe we just combined it with Jake's tight end question from Kansas City. He has Evan Ingram, Jatavian Sanders, and Ben Sinnott on a contender and has pick 4, 5, and 9 and wanted to know if he should draft a tight end with his 9th pick. I think if you truly feel like a contender, the 2 guys that I'm trying to go get are see if I can trade a late first, maybe for George Kittle and a second, or see if I can trade a second for Travis Kelce. If you can't do that, or if you're not quite to the contending window, then I do think there are 3 or 4 tight ends in this class. Definitely Warren, definitely Colston Loveland out of Michigan, definitely Harold Fannin. Those 3 guys in tight end premium, if they're there at pick 9 for you, Joseph, I'd be willing to go in that direction. So it really just kind of depends on how close are you to contending. I like the rookies and the younger guys, even Sanders and Ben Sinnott, who are on Jake's team. If you're in a kind of a rebuilding mode and just hope one of those guys turns into a difference maker. I like targeting Kelce, Kittle, maybe even Andrews if he's cheap, if you're in a contending window. I'm not particularly interested in making a trade for somebody in that tight end 7 through tight end 12 range, because really what tight end premium does is it makes those elite tight ends, the guys who catch a ton of passes, get a bunch of targets, it makes those guys even more valuable than the guys in the low end tight end 1 range. And I'm not sure it does much to separate the tight end 1s from the tight end 2s. So don't overpay for mediocre tight end production just because you're in a tight end premium class. See if you can target either older, proven high target earners or some of these younger guys that might turn into studs. One other thing that Jake said in his message was Brenton Strange is the only free agent worth anything. Brenton Strange is definitely someone that whenever free agency opens up in your dynasty league, I would be looking to add. And let's just see what his role looks like. The Jacksonville offense is not going to be as tight end centric now that Doug Peterson is gone, but I still think Strange off the waiver wire could be a top 12 tight end. Quick trade question from Alec in the emails. He was offered Sam Darnold for Isaac Guerendo and a 2025 second. It's 208. This is a 10-man super flex PPR league. Alec, take that trade really quick. I don't need to give you any more advice. Sam Darnold, I've got a little bit of question mark about what he's going to do in Seattle when he goes away from Kevin O'Connell, but Guerendo and a late second for a starting quarterback that I expect will be starting at least the next 2 years. That's a great deal. Go get him. Mitchell is in a stalled rebuild. Tried to go all in a couple of years ago. It didn't work. Last year before the draft, I tore it all down. I sold Kupp, McCaffrey, Etienne, Laporta, and more to regain capital and restart the rebuild. So after more trades, getting some capital back for this year, it looks like it's just kind of, you guys have been there. You're rebuilding, but you're having a hard time seeing the path to contending. He's been offered either Jameson Williams or Jerry Jeudy. I'd prefer Jameson Williams, along with the 3rd pick, the 7th pick, and the 11th pick in this year's draft. Now, that's a lot of draft capital. 3 top 11 picks, 103, 107, and 111, along with Jameson Williams. The guy wants Ladd McConkey and Marvin Harrison. I thought this was a great trade to illustrate one of the truths of the trade chart, because if you go and put these names into the trade chart, you'll see Jameson and the picks are worth about 58 points. Ladd and Marvin Harrison are worth about 52 points. You think, man, I got to do that deal. That's a 4-for-2 trade. What I always say is if you're getting one more player than the other team and you're giving up the best player, you need a 10% premium. If you're in this case, you're getting two more players, 3 picks, 1 player for 2 players. So it's a 4-for-2. I would want a 20% premium on that type of deal. And you're probably giving up the 2 best players in the deal as well. So to give up that type of value, I would need even more. Mitchell says the person has 105 as well. If you took away, I don't think moving from 107 to 105 in that deal is enough. But if you could get 103, 105, and 107, as along with Jamison Williams for those two wide receivers, then I'd probably do it. I think one of the risks when you get caught in that stalled rebuild is you just say, okay, I'm going to push it back another year. I'm going to push it back another year. And you just keep acquiring picks, but you never feel like, yeah, I'm ready now. So I'd be hesitant. I think there's a chance that Marvin Harrison takes a leap in year 2. Ladd McConkey stays the number 1 wide receiver for Justin Herbert. And all of a sudden you're looking at this team as having 2 top 12 wide receivers for redraft purposes and maybe 2 top 8 in Dynasty. And then you're not that far from contending. We had a couple of questions about Anthony Richardson in Superflex leagues. And I understand the reason for those questions. One of the most volatile assets in all of Dynasty Superflex fantasy football. Mike has Burrow, JJ McCarthy, and Richardson. The Daniel Jones owner wants to trade 211 this year or a late 2026 first for Richardson. Mike's a contender, but needs some running backs. Wants to know whether to accept that trade. Curtis, on the other hand, says, is trading Anthony Richardson for less than a first worth it, or just hold and hope that he rises during camp? This is more of a personal risk question than it is one that I can answer for you guys. The way that I play Dynasty Fantasy Football and Super Flex leagues, there's no way I'm giving up Anthony Richardson for less than a first. Would I take a 2026 first, for, like as Mike is saying here? I probably won't if I think I'm a contender. I would like to have Burrow, McCarthy, and Richardson going into next year. If I was going to trade Richardson as a contender, I'd be looking maybe to get one of the more low upside vets as opposed to trading him for a 2026 first. And Curtis, no, I personally would not give Richardson up for less than a first. I think I'd rather take that chance and see it not work out than take a second round pick and take the chances that Anthony Richardson over the summer gets a little bit better as a passer. I don't think it would take a little bit better as a passer, and all of a sudden is averaging 25 fantasy points per game. I see some questions already accumulating in the chat. We will get to those questions a little bit later in the show, so keep putting those in there. And after we get through the emails, after we get through the tweets, after we get through some questions from Blue Sky, we will answer your chat questions as well. Let's move to the top tweets. Nathan asks, where are you ranking Tee Higgins? We've had this mystery around Tee Higgins. Is he going to be the number 2 in Cincinnati? Is he going to get a chance to go be the number 1 somewhere else? Well, he had signed his 4-year deal in my most recent updated Dynasty wide receiver rankings, which we'll publish today over at cbssports.com. Tee Higgins is my wide receiver 15, right behind Drake London, A.J. Brown, and Jordan Addison. Right ahead of Rashee Rice, Rome Odunze, and Xavier Worthy. I think there's obviously a lot of room to maneuver within that range. And if you are a contender, maybe you'd rather have Higgins than Addison. I view them kind of similarly, other than Higgins has his quarterback locked up, but Addison is 3 years younger. And then you could see Rice or Worthy, either one, fall out of the top 20 because of suspension, or move ahead of Higgins because they become the true number 1 for Patrick Mahomes and fully deliver on their potential. But right in that wide receiver 15 range, he's probably the best number 2 wide receiver in the NFL and maybe the best number 2 wide receiver on his own team in Dynasty. Ryan tweeted he has Jalen Hurts and Bryce Young, has a team that's ready to compete. He has the 102. Would you draft Cam Ward or draft someone else? I'm pretty much at the point in Superflex, if I have the second pick, where I'm just going to wait and see if the guy with 101 takes Genty or takes Ward, and I'm probably going to take the other one. Having Hurts and Young I think that's a decent 1-2, but I would definitely want a good number 3, and I think Ward could be a good number 3 that if he hits his upside could actually pass Young, become your number 2, and then you've got a great 1, 2, 3 at quarterback. So yeah, draft Ward. If for some reason the 101 takes Ward, then go get Genty. Matt says, how many of these rookie running backs are going to be solid Dynasty running backs for the next 3 years? I would say feel really confident in Ashton Genty. I feel really confident in Amarian Hampton. I feel really confident in Trevion Henderson. That's 3. There's 3 more guys that maybe we get 1 or 2 of them, and then I think you get 1 or 2 from the rest of the class. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have 5 or 6 like consistent RB2s or better from this draft class. When you look at my running back rankings that just updated on the site yesterday, you're going to see someone like Najee Harris at RB25. I would expect after the NFL draft happens that he's going to be RB30 because 5 at best. He might be worse if the Chargers draft a running back too. But you're going to see at least 5 backs from this class that are ranked in the top 25 of my dynasty running back rankings. At least that is my expectation. Joey asks, how many players would you take over the 101? That's Ashton Genty in my mind. And so if you look at the trade chart over on Sportsline in Superflex, there are 17 players that are listed above 101. Jahmyr Gibbs is directly in front of him. Caleb Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's 1 tight end in Brock Bowers. I think there's 6 wide receivers. Let's see. Brian Thomas, Puka Nacua, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. And then the rest are quarterbacks. In 1 QB leagues, the 2025 101, I would value at pick 11, right behind, again, Bowers, St. Brown, and Gibbs. So it's a top 12 pick in a 1 QB league. It's a mid-second in a Superflex startup. We had a pair of A.J. Brown questions, one from Twitter, one from Blue Sky. The Twitter from the Playmakers, would you tear down from A.J. Brown for, say, DJ Moore and a second-round pick if you could get it done? Possibly they're similar in production for 2025. Maybe you believe that Ben Johnson takes DJ Moore into the ARSB role. So if you look at my dynasty wide receiver rankings, there's a decent size gap between Brown, who's my wide receiver 13, and Moore, who is my wide receiver 24. Looking at the trade chart here, it's quite. I think that you have to expect that the average output next year is still significantly better for Brown. I've got him worth 23 points on the Superflex trade chart. Moore is worth 16. 7, a value of 7 is probably what you're looking at for pick 201, 202, 203. So I guess the answer is, yeah, if you were getting one of the first 3 picks in a Superflex league in the 2025 draft, then I'd be okay with downgrading from Brown to Moore. I had a question also on Blue Sky. Is it time to trade A.J. Brown? What can I get for him? I put the question out on social media this week, and I heard people saying 105 was about how they valued A.J. Brown. In my trade chart, he's actually worth 103 or 104. So if you could get that good of a pick, it's time to move on from A.J. Brown if you're moving into a rebuild. He will be 28 at the start of the season. He's probably got 3 years left of elite production, maybe 2 years left of elite production, possibly 4. But that's not the type of thing or player I want to be holding if I'm moving towards a rebuild. I would rather go ahead and get younger at that position if I can. I think I read some of the younger wide receivers that I have in that range, that if you just want to get younger, maybe it's a Jordan Addison who's 5 years younger, maybe it's a Drake London who's 4 years younger. You might have to add something to Brown to get London. But yeah, if you're in the middle of like a title chase, if you're contending year after year, I don't think it's time to get rid of Brown. I think you look at what Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, those guys did from age 28 to 30. And you want to leave that guy on your roster if you're trying to win a championship right now. Let's take our first break. We've got some more questions from social media, and then I will get to your questions in the chat.
Brackets are back. Play CBS Sports Bracket games for a chance to win a new SUV and a trip to the 2026 Final Four. Get the CBS Sports App now to play.
You just saw the promo here. It is March Madness time. Do you think you've got the best bracket? Join our challenge at cbssports.com/FFT. Man, we've got some great prizes this year. Of course, as always, you can win a spot in our podcast league. But if you win the whole thing, you also win a year of Paramount Plus. And if you finish second or third, you get a month of Paramount Plus. It is a fantastic time to go win a Paramount Plus subscription. They got some great shows there right now. I was looking at my bracket today. I keep coming up with two teams that I really am not huge fans of in the championship. Sorry, Thomas, one of them is yours. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting tournament. Looking forward to it. Let's get back to the questions. We had a few in from Blue Sky. Steve says, wondering where you're at on three receivers who all had down years last year. Chris Olave, Jaylen Waddle, and Garrett Wilson. If you had the 111 and needed a receiver, who would you target out of this group? Or is there someone else you would use the pick on? First thing I would say is if I had the 111 and I could get any of those three guys, I would really be happy to do it. As of right now, I have Garrett Wilson at wide receiver 20 in the most recent Dynasty rankings, Olave wide receiver 23, Waddle wide receiver 25. Waddle is slightly older than the other two. He'll be 26 at the start of the year. I mostly view all three of these guys as guys that should be number 2 wide receivers. Maybe it's a low-end variety. I don't love the Justin Fields signing for Garrett Wilson, but it's kind of a mixed bag because, yeah, there's going to be fewer pass attempts. The accuracy is probably not going to be great, but they are former college teammates, and Fields did deliver a great season for DJ Moore. Maybe he just throws 150 passes to Garrett Wilson, and Wilson's a top 12 wide receiver. Any of those three guys, I'd be thrilled to give 111 for. I don't think you're probably going to be able to get that done. Waddle, who is my lowest ranked, I actually have ranked closer to 106 or 107 in a Superflex league. So great buys coming off of down years. Still think they're very talented. Maybe a little more quarterback concern for Wilson and Olave than for Waddle, but Waddle has the competition with Tyreek Hill. Second question from JB. As a rebuilding team in a standard PPR league, so a standard PPR, I think that means not Superflex, would you trade 201 for Rashee Rice? If not, any young wide receivers you try to target with it? Yes, very quickly, JB. Go again, 111, 201. I'd probably trade those picks for any wide receiver in my top 30. If you need a wide receiver, definitely look for a team that's looking for running backs. Try to trade them one of those late first or one of the first picks in round 2 and go get you a wide receiver. It's a great opportunity to kind of make that move. One of the questions I had that didn't make the mailbag, this makes me think of it, is like, how do you combat the narrative that this is a weak class? Because a lot of dynasty managers have been trained that rookie drafts, especially the first round, in Superflex leagues should all be about quarterbacks and wide receivers. So they don't see a lot of great quarterbacks and wide receivers in this draft, and they think, oh, it's a bad year. Well, you're just talking to the wrong people. You need to go find managers who are looking for or who value running backs and tight ends. And that's how you get a premium on this year's draft picks if you're trying to trade them, because it's a great running back class. It's a very good tight end class. You just have to sell it that way. If you're talking to somebody who needs quarterback or wide receiver help, you're probably not going to have much luck selling your picks this year. Leaf wants a Trey McBride value check. He says, is he worth the 106 in Superflex? I'm getting a lot of offers for him, but having a hard time trading him away, given the lack of difference makers at the tight end position. I agree with you 100%. I would not be making that move. I view Trey McBride, even in a Superflex league, as being worth the 103 in this year's draft class. That's partly a product of there not being a lot of great quarterbacks at the top of the class. But I don't think there's a player in this class I would rather have on my dynasty roster than Trey McBride, except for Ashton Genty and Cam Ward. Maybe the NFL draft changes that, but I don't think he'd be as low as 106. So I would not be taking that deal. I'd be holding on to McBride. I think he and Bowers are the two certain difference makers over the next 5 years. Hopefully Laporta has a rebound year and we feel the same way about him going into 2026. One more question from Prong. Third year guys. Are we holding or taking our best offer for Dalton Kincaid, Quentin Johnston, Tyjae Spears, and Bryce Young? These always depend on what is that best offer, right? If there's still a Dalton Kincaid believer in your league, then I'm taking the best offer. And I would say that about really any of these guys except for Bryce Young. What he showed me in the second half in a super flex league, I'd really like to hold on to him, because if he continues what he did late in the year or even takes another step forward, Bryce Young right now is my QB 23. I could see him rising as high as QB 14, like 4 to 6 weeks into the season. So I'd like to hold on to Bryce Young. I don't think you are getting much for Quentin Johnston or Tyjae Spears. So like probably a 3rd round rookie pick, unless somebody's offering you a 2nd for one of those guys, I'm probably holding them as well. I would be shopping Dalton Kincaid. I don't know. A lot of times the guy who believed in him in the first place already has him on their roster. That may be you. But if there is somebody else in the league that thinks, you know what, this is the year, Kincaid was hurt last year. It's young tight ends are often bad. He's going to break out in year 3. If you can get somebody that believes in him like that, maybe give you a top 15 pick in a rookie draft, then I would be dealing Dalton Kincaid. Now, I say top 15, that's assuming that it's not tight end premium. In a tight end premium league, he is absolutely still worth a 1st round pick. You guys are filling up the chat with questions, and I absolutely love that. Let's get to a few of them. Hans says, what is Pickens and Pittman's value? Should I hold them or sell for whatever value I can right now? I'd like to take a drink right now, and hopefully we get some clarity on where George Pickens is going to play next year. In all seriousness, I could see George Pickens dealt in the next month to a really good situation and his value rebounds. If he goes into next year with one of these veteran quarterbacks that are left that I don't think a whole lot of, and DK Metcalf sharing time with him, then Pickens' value is only going to go down. Right now, he's my wide receiver 26 in Dynasty. He is actually a couple of spots ahead of DK because I think they're kind of the same guy, and Pickens is 3 years younger. But if I could get a 1st for Pickens, I would take it. I don't think you probably can right now due to the uncertainty, so I'm probably holding him. Michael Pittman is my wide receiver 42. I am not particularly excited about him. You like the situation when Joe Flacco is the backup, and that way if Anthony Richardson gets benched, yay, we've got a quarterback who will feed wide receivers. Now the answer is if Anthony Richardson gets benched, you're dealing with Daniel Jones. I'm not sure how much better that's going to be for Michael Pittman. I'd be happy to take a 2nd round pick for him. I'd feel pretty good about it. Britt says Tyreek and Ramondre for the 103 in a 1 QB league. I would be getting the 103. I think that's appropriate value without doing the math in the trade chart. The difficult part of that equation is, are you trying to win right now? Because if you are, I don't think the 103 is likely to help you as much as Tyreek and Ramondre are. But value-wise, it's a fit. So how intent are you on being a team that's competing for a title this year? If you're not at all, it's a great trade. Go do it. If you're selling out to win, it's not the right move. Mighty Boosh says, Ayuk, what's he worth? Worth holding on to if you're not an obvious contender? Probably another guy who is value is probably closer to the floor than it is to the ceiling right now. I wouldn't want to hold on too long because the problem is, like we were talking about these 28-year-old wide receivers as if you're not contending, it's probably time to move off of them. Well, Ayuk's 27, and we don't know how long it's going to take into this 2025 season before he's a full-time contender. So if we get to the middle of the season and he's not looked like himself, that value is really going to go into the tank. We got a few more questions showing up in the chat, and I'll just pick out a few here. Again, thank you guys. We'll try to do this once a month. Probably won't have a one-man mailbag in April just because we're going to have so much draft content. We'll definitely get back to it at the end of May. Maybe I'll write a mailbag article early in April. David says, I give Marvin Harrison Jr. and Josh Jacobs for the 111 and JSN. That's a really interesting trade. I have JSN and Marvin Harrison Jr. back-to-back in my wide receiver rankings. Currently have JSN one spot higher, have zero confidence in that. So basically, I would say call those two a push How do you feel about sending Josh Jacobs for the 111? I don't feel great about it. I think I'd rather have I'd rather have Harrison and Jacobs than I would 111 and JSN. I'd call it a C minus, but I could definitely see ways that it could work out. Raf says, what would you do if you had Taylor and Cook? I assume Jonathan Taylor and James Cook as your RB 3 and 4. What would you try to get for one of them in a 10-team, 1 QB PPR league? Man, I would say first off, like I'm looking at my running back rankings, and Jonathan Taylor's RB6 and James Cook's RB11. And so if that's your RB3 and your RB4, you're doing a fantastic job, Raf. Can you start them? How many flexes are you allowed to use in this league? If I could start all 4, like 2 running backs better than those guys, and those 2 guys at my flexes, I don't know that I need to move off of them. If I had to trade one right now, I think it would be Jonathan Taylor. And I've talked about this a lot. It seems like maybe I'm a little lower on the value of some of these picks, particularly in a super flex league. But if I'm trading Jonathan Taylor, I'd like to get a top 5 rookie pick and see if you can get that done. Listen, if somebody's thinking they're going to add a running back, then maybe that doesn't work out very well because they just want to draft one of these rookies. So if you're looking for a wide receiver to trade Taylor for, it'd be somebody in that Tee Higgins, Rashee Rice, Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy range. If you wanted to trade him for a quarterback in a 1 QB league, I'd be happy to give up Taylor for either Lamar or Josh Allen. So somewhere in that range. See if we can get 2 or 3 more questions before we get out of here. Let's call it 2. We've got a MV Prof. How are you doing? Good to have you back. Thank you. Judy, Waddle, DK, or JMO? I still like Waddle the best. JMO is not far behind. But yeah, that's a good group of wide receivers, high-end wide receiver 3s in Dynasty. And who knows, if Judy gets a QB, he might become the guy. We got a Tua question, which is good because somebody in our Baked Burger Dynasty League has been trying to trade me Tua for Drake May. You know who you are, Tim. And we haven't been able to get that deal done, but he has Tua as his 3rd QB in a Superflex Dynasty League. Is it smart to try to trade him for a more questionable quarterback, such as Darnold or someone similar? I don't know. Again, it's almost like the Anthony Richardson situation, not quite as much upside. And Tua is not going to lose his job because of play, but I do value Tua slightly higher than I do Sam Darnold. If I was trading Tua, maybe it would be for a quarterback that's older, like a Goff or a Baker Mayfield or a Dak Prescott, or maybe you try to sell Tua and something, or to try to see if the person who has Justin Fields is trying to capitalize. You can get Fields and something for Tua. Both guys have kind of uncertain futures, but I basically view Tua as a dynasty QB2 that if he stays healthy and plays 17 games with Tyreek and Waddle, could give you a top 12 QB season any given year. But we know the risks, right? Right in the same range as a JJ McCarthy, a Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, and then Darnold's right behind those guys. So as a 3rd QB, I'm okay with that. Maybe you try to use him in your 2nd QB to go get a truly elite quarterback for a team that I didn't skip your question, Dwight. I apologize, but try to target one of those teams that has one really good quarterback, but doesn't have enough depth at the position. I was trying to scroll through here and see if I could find Dwight's question. There it is. Let's do it real quick. Would you trade Devon Achane for JSN? Last question of the show. Achane is worth 34.3 on my most recent trade chart. JSN 30.8. That's close enough for me that if you were strong at running back, weak at wide receiver, or if you were just moving into more of a rebuilding period and wanted to have the wide receiver and not the running back, that makes sense. In a bubble, I slightly prefer HN, but yeah, the deal's close enough that if you're trying to add wide receivers or trying to move off of a running back, I kind of like it, Dwight. It'd be okay. Probably give you a C+, depending on the context of your team. That is going to do it for our March one-man mailbag show. Again, send your questions in to fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. Send me questions over on Twitter or on Blue Sky, either one. I'm there for both, and we will talk to you on Friday.